Okay, so here we are on part 3. All right, see if I can move me up a little bit too. Having trouble seeing my cursor. There we go, we'll move me up there. Okay. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled around tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leant over to the side to try to see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. If anyone but Gringotts Goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there, said Griphook. "How often do you check to see if anyone's inside?" "About once every 10 years, said Griphook, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leant forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least, but at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper laying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but he knew better than to ask. "Come on, back to this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One wild ride cart later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run to first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to be a pound to know that he was holding more money than he had in his entire life, more money than Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding toward Madame Malkin's robe for all occasions. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a moment to pick-me-up at the Leaky Cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts." He still did look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop, feeling alone and feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was squat, smiling, dressed in a mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here, another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with pale, pointed face, standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned up his long robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him and slipped a long robe over his head and began to pin it to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts, too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my book, and my mother's up the street looking at wands." "Okay, we're going to the next page," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "I am going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully Father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No." And again, Harry was wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father said it's a crime that I'm not picked to play for my house. I must say, I agree. You know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the moment. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family has been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy, suddenly nodding towards the front of the window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry, pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy, "I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he?" "He's a gamekeeper," said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. "Yes, exactly. I've heard he's sort of savage, lives in a hut on the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting the bed on fire." I think he's brilliant, said Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel like much going into the matter with the boy. Oh, sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and a wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let those other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter. Imagine, I would think they would keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, by the way? Before Harry could answer, Madame Milkin said, You're done, my dear. And Harry, not so sorry for the excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate the ice cream Hagrid had brought him, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. What's up? Said Hagrid. Nothing, lied Harry. They stopped to buy parchment and quills, and Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed color as you wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what is Quidditch? Blimey, Harry, I kept forgetting how little you know, not knowing about Quidditch. Don't make me feel worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy and Madame Melkins, and he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed. You're not from a Muggle family. If he had known who you were, he had grown up knowing your name, and your parents are wizarding folks. You saw them at the Leaky Cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were the only ones with magic in them in a long line of Muggles. Look at your mom. Look, she had her for a sister. So what is Quidditch? It is our sport. A wizard sport, like football in the Muggle world. Played in the air on broomsticks, and there are 4 balls, sort of like hard to explain the rules. What are Slithering and Pufflepuff? There are schoolhouses. There are 4. Everyone says Hufflepuffs are a lot of duffers, but, well, I bet I'm a Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch and wizard who went bad who wasn't from Slytherin. You know who was one. You know who was at Hogwarts. Years and years ago, said Hagrid. They brought Harry's books in the shop called Flourish and Blots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones bound in leather, and books the size of smooth postage stamps covered in silk. Books full of peculiar symbols, and even a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would be wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid had almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses, bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest ravages, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue flying, and much more, by Professor Vindicus Verin. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but you're not to use your magic in the Muggle world, except for very special circumstances, said Hagrid. Anyway, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You need a lot more study before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says pewter on your list, but they got a nice set of scales for weighing potions and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary's, which was fascinating to make up for the horrible smell, a mixture of bad eggs and rotten cabbages. Barrels of slimy food stuff stood on the floor. Jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls. Bundles of feathers, strings of fangs, snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potion ingredients for Harry, Harry himself examined a silver unicorn horn at 21 gallons each, and a minuscule glittery beetle bug eyes for 5 newts a scoop. Outside the apothecary, Hagrid checked Harry's list again. Just your wine left. Oh yeah, I still haven't gotten your birthday present. Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to. Well, you know I don't have to. Tell you what, I'll go get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me squeeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful for carrying your post and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Aylop's Owl Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering, jewel-bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage which held a beautiful snowy white owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. He couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sounding like Professor Quirrell. "Don't mention it," said Hagrid gruffly. "Don't expect a lot of presents from the Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left now. Only place for wands, Ollivander, and you have to have the best wand." A magic wand. This was what Harry had been really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby, peeling gold letters over the door. Ollivander's, maker of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkering bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop as they stood outside. It was a teeny place except for a small spindly chair which Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as he had entered this very strict library. He swallowed a lot of questions which had just occurred to him and looked instead at 1,000 rows of narrow boxes piled neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence there seemed to tingle with some secret magic. "Good afternoon," said a small voice. Harry jumped. Hagrid must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before him, with wide pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the dark. "Hello," said Harry awkwardly. "Ah, yes," said the man. Yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes, but it seems like only yesterday she was here herself buying her first wand. 10¼ inches, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work." Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he could blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches, pliable, a little bit more power, and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it. It really is the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. Mr. Ollivander had come so close to Harry, and Harry was almost nose to nose. Harry could see him reflected in his misty eyes, and that's where Mr. Oliver touched a lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long white finger. "I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did this," he said softly. 13½ inches. You, powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I had known that what that wand was going to do to the world to do. He shook his head and then, to Harry's relief, spotted Hagrid. Rubius Hagrid, how nice it is to see you again. Oak, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Yes, sir. Good wand it was. I suppose they snapped it in half after you got expelled. Yes, it was, sir. Shuffling his feet. I still got the pieces, though, he said brightly. But you don't use them, said Mr. Ollivander sharply. Oh, no, sir, said Hagrid quickly. Harry noticed he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. Well, now, Mr. Potter, let's see. He pulled out a long tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. Which is your wand arm? Well, I'm right-handed. Hold out your arm. That's it. He measured Harry's from shoulder to his finger, and then his wrist to his elbow, and his shoulder to the floor, and his knee to his armpit, and around his head. As he measured, he said, every Ollivander's wand has a core of a powerful magic substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander's wands are the same.